Hello, MouseHunt. Welcome to Feedback Friday. It is August 17, 2018. Jacob was going to join you today, but actually had some things to take care of where it would be better off for him to be in the office to do those things. So you have me this week instead. Normally when he streams from home. He works from home that day because he doesn't have a laptop. He uses a desktop machine. So it's a little bit tricky to cart it back and forth, I guess, in order to move it from his desk into a quiet area. So hello. Hello everyone in the chat. Tarako, Dennis, Maz, Brian, Eric, Michelle, Eileen, hello. Chi, hello. Well, this week, I thought we'd just kind of quickly go over some upcoming updates to the burrows, including the laboratory and mausoleum. We've kind of touched base on a few plans, but thought maybe I'd go into a little bit more detail, share a little bit more of the artwork as well. So as we mentioned in other Feedback Fridays, we've had a lot of great success improving some of the early game areas to help new hunters progress through the beginning of the game and sticking around a lot longer. And that's great to see. It's great for the long-term sort of health of the game. Seeing new players come in and they're sticking around, they're playing, they're enjoying the game. So the next areas that we have our sights on to improve are the laboratory and the mausoleum. We'll be adding some heads-up displays to both the areas, new zombie-themed gameplay for the mausoleum in particular, as well as overhauling the adventure. Going to kind of change even the way you kind of progress the order that you do things in, so you can kind of let us know what you think as we go here. The laboratory first up. Now this will retain its role as a place to collect radioactive blue cheese. For the most part, it's going to feel very similar. We're adding a heads-up display, has a little bit of a, obviously a laboratory theme to it, a little bit of a chemistry set kind of vibe, showing you how many radioactive blue potions you have, helping you to arm the cheese from the HUD, as well as give you a little bit of guidance towards getting to the end. Now, the biggest change is that we're making the monster sort of the big bad mouse of the laboratory, and it will now drop the map piece to the mausoleum, and you're going to need radioactive blue cheese to lure the monster towards your trap. So it'll be kind of very straightforward. There'll be a HUD there showing you the potions, helping you see how many potions you've collected, helping you brew the potions right from the HUD so you don't have to go to the inventory. You can arm your radioactive blue cheese straight from the HUD. And when you do that, the monster mouse gets added to the encounter pool. When you capture the monster mouse, drops the mausoleum map piece, and you can move on to the mausoleum. Will scientist charms still be used there? Yes, we'll have to go through audit, kind of see all the other little side effect stuff, but those should work just fine. Oh boy, that cheese, I love that art, says Dennis. Well, that brings us to the mausoleum, which is going to see some more significant updates. We're going to split the gameplay kind of into two phases. One is a zombie phase, where you're building a very crude barricade to keep all the hordes of zombies at bay, kind of lock them away from your trap. And until you do that, the mausoleum is just overrun. You're getting overrun with the various zombie breeds of mice. We're adding a few new zombies as well, just to kind of round out the encounter pool and gives them some unique loot drops to kind of help out with progression. And then once you build that barricade out of stuff that the zombies are dropping, the zombies will get locked away. You'll no longer encounter the zombies, and instead the other mice in the mausoleum come out, and they drop a new item here, which is over here. It's a new type of curd to make crimson cheese, which is a vampire-themed cheese, and you can kind of see the two little cute vampire fang holes in the cheese. You'll be collecting the curd, then making a new type of cheese, which then brings out the vampire mouse, or various vampire mice, including Mouse Vina von Vermin, who used to be an event mouse for Halloween. We're going to move her into the Shadow Clan. She's going to be strictly a mausoleum mouse now. And that will be sort of the new big bad mouse of the mausoleum will be Mouse Vina von Vermin. So capturing her will drop the map piece to move on to the training grounds and move forward to Feroma. How many new mice? Off the top of my head, I don't know. I think there's maybe 5, maybe half a dozen or so. I know we have a few new mice being added to the laboratory. Some of them are potion themed, and they'll be sort of the good potion droppers now. And then in the mausoleum as well, we're adding some new zombie mice. One of them has a sort of wooden coffin theme to it, because the barricade you're building it out of these slabs of wood that are found in the mausoleum. Than that. Finally, just as kind of an is sort of included. We're not out, but because we're sort of unlock it, previously you'd have to go to the lab, then to Digby, then to the mausoleum, but we're changing it so you go laboratory, straight to the mausoleum, and then at the mausoleum you can kind of fulfill a side quest mission to then unlock Digby and go try to go get the Digby drill bot or pursue the big bad Burroughs. But it's all kind of very side quest sort of feel. It was not anymore, or no longer is it tied into the main game progression. Now that said, obviously there's some shadow traps that Digby sells. Those are going to be moved into trapsmiths at both the laboratory and the mausoleum. So Digby will be affected a little bit, but not a whole lot. That said, we do kind of want to revamp the gameplay a little bit there as well, but we're kind of trying to focus on streamlining the adventures that move you toward, or move you forward in the game towards some of the more end-game areas. And I touched on this a little bit as well, but the mouse groups we're going to give a little bit of an overhaul to. We're adding some new mice. Over the years, that generic indigenous mice group has grown rather large. So we're kind of taking the opportunity, because we're going to be touching the Shadow Clan. We're adding new mouse to the laboratory, and it kind of feels weird to add them to the indigenous mice group. So we're kind of doing a little bit of a shuffle of how the mice are organized a little bit, depending on where's the best place to encounter them. So we're adding a new lab experiments group, and that's going to encompass the new lab mice, like this little cute robot mouse you see here, as well as the mutated white, gray, and brown mouse. The monster mouse is going to be part of the lab experiments group. I think the bionic mouse as well. A few of the mice that are sort of very contained, or not contained in the lab, but the lab is where they have their highest encounter rate, or thematically sort of where they come from. As well as the indigenous mice group. We're going to kind of break that down a little bit. Like I said, it's gotten very large, so we're adding a dock dwellers group. It's always kind of weird how the pirates were in the aquatic order. It kind of felt a little bit tacked on. So we're making a dock dwellers group that contains all those harbor-specific mice, or the very harbor, the mice that you encounter quite a bit in the harbor. So all the pirate-themed mice that you get there during the map quest there. Also a mountain mice group. Now it contains some of the mice that are most abundant in the mountain, so most notably the abominable snow mouse, as well as the gold mouse, the diamond mouse, the pebble mouse, craggy ore mouse, literally the mountain mouse, I believe is his name as well. That will be in a mountain mice group, and that's just kind of shrunk down the indigenous mice group a little bit, and it's moved some of the more laboratory themed mice into a lab experiment group. And it's going to kind of have the effect where when you get to the harbor, you'll start making progress on a new mouse group. So steel, granite, and bionic are in the lab experiment group. The bionic is, the steel we're kind of playing around with a little bit, because it's also, I don't know if the lab is where the highest encounter rate of the steel mouse is, especially now that we are adding some new potion-themed mice to the lab to sort of replace some of the encounters that used to be steel mice. Will Halloween traps have effects in the areas now? Off the top of my head, I don't know. I can't think of the zombie-specific ones. I think they're all sort of coded to work with zombies more than the areas, so they kind of check if you're capturing a zombie-themed mouse. Will the Zombot Unipire and Grave Robber still only be attracted to Undead Emmental? I believe that is the plan. So part of the zombie invasion event as well should still work in the mausoleum. Grant says, +1 to new groups. That indigenous group was quite large. And actually, within that group now, let me see if I can quickly double check. Oops, I don't have the right thing open. I forget how many mice now are in it. Now, it's still a little bit of a work in progress. We're getting feedback and fine-tuning as we play test it. Right now, there are 25 mice left in the indigenous group. And we've added one subgroup in there. We have it called Rare Rodents right now that has the Crown Collector, the Black Widow, and the Relic Hunter. Now as well, eventually when we get to the Bazaar, we'll probably do a little bit more fine-tuning, and probably want to add some very burglar-specific gameplay to the Bazaar, but we're a ways off before we get to overhauling that area. Steel was redrawn to a night now, doesn't feel like much of a lab experience. Yes, and I think the town of Narnia now is the best place to go and find a steel mouse. Whereas it's probably about between 9 and 10 years old, but the lab originally, the bionic, the granite, and the steel were sort of a trio of mice that you found a lot in the laboratory, and they dropped the potions. But now we're adding some potion-themed mice that drop potions. There's a chemist. I forget the other mice. Let me see here. Actually, I have it open now. A sludge scientist, a clumsy chemist, and a squeaker bot. So they're very laboratory themed, and 2 of them are very potion themed as well. Will the attraction rate of the monster in the mausoleum be affected with this overhaul? It may be. I don't know if the monster will be in the mausoleum anymore. You may have to go to the laboratory to hunt the monster. Any news on Monolith base rework? Nothing planned currently. We'll probably do that when and if we overhaul the gameplay in Digby. But kind of the only changes to Digby coming are putting it sort of at the end. So you unlock Laboratory, Mausoleum, then optionally you can go and unlock Digby. So is this a lab challenge or a mini event? No, it's a permanent change to the Mausoleum and the laboratory, kind of overhauling, as well as the adventures are getting overhauled. So there'll just be a single adventure that takes a new hunter from the laboratory to get some radioactive blue, get the monster, unlock the Mausoleum, and then the same adventure. Then you go to the Mausoleum, you hunt with your radioactive blue there, fend off the zombies, get some vampire cheese, slay Mosvina von Vermin, adventure complete, you can claim your reward and move on. Won't scientist terms increase the attraction rate of steel mice in the lab? I mean, they might have to be fine-tuned a little bit, but part of our sort of end phase when we're putting something together, we have this big checklist of items that we start going through, and we kind of review, what do we call it? Let's see, I forget what we call it. I don't even know if I have an example handy, actually. It's not that interesting either. Review possibly affected existing content is a sort of audit task that gets lumped into the template of every single release we do. And it has this big long checklist of things that are at least commonly affected, things like adding orb drops to various mice, that sort of thing. The scientist charm, it increases the chance of mice dropping the potions as well as the quantity increased in the laboratory. So I believe, again, it's quite an old item. I don't know the exact specifics of how it was implemented, but I believe it checks. If the mouse is going to drop a radioactive blue potion, it applies a buff to make sure it's very likely to drop it, and then it increments the min and max quantity, if I recall. So, is the Black Widow being removed from the lab? I don't believe so. I think it'll still be there because you use standard bait, so you can still use Super Brie, and using Super Brie in the lab will give you a better attraction rate, and as well as attract some of the potion dropping mice a little bit more often. We have revamp on tournaments as well. That has been sort of in the idea bank, the backlog for quite some time, but no immediate plans. We haven't had any time to revisit tournaments. How many vampire mice are there? I think it's just the 2 that I recall. I think it's Mosvina von Vermin and the vampire mouse itself. And the other new mice is a new zombie. I believe it's coffin themed. And then 3 lab mice. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 new mice. And then some event mice. Actually, I think just Mosvina von Vermin. We were playing around with maybe some of the other Halloween mice as well, being moved to the mausoleum, but we'll kind of have to see how that goes as we start playtesting. What other event mice are going to do this jump as well? Not sure yet. I think the candidates were the Cobweb Mouse, the Spirit Light Mouse, the Teenage Vampire, I think, was maybe an option as well, but we'll kind of have to see as we fine-tune it a little bit if we need some more encounters in there. Is there any plan to reward Duke and above in tournaments? Nothing new for tournaments planned at the moment, but you can certainly keep feedback and suggestions coming. Just haven't had any time to put focus on tournaments. Any plans to improve the trap power for the traps sold in the catacombs or having more traps available there? No, nothing immediately. We did add a forgotten trap there a while ago. It was a little bit awkward to capture the Acolyte mouse as the game kind of advanced. Teenage Vampire, it's 2 Halloween, I think. Trick-or-treating the art has candy on her. Alright, good to know. Now, like I said, we're kind of, a lot of fine-tuning to go. This is still quite a ways off. We're planning on releasing this probably about 2 months from now. So it's probably even a little bit too early to even be going over it on Feedback Friday, but early feedback never hurts. Make a new vampire-themed mouse. We'll see. We're sort of, and this is, we need player feedback as well. We try not to add too many new mice. I know it's obviously if we need to, if we think that's going to make the gameplay more fun, then we don't hesitate to do that. For instance, we needed some potion-themed mice for the lab, and it was taking too long before you even find new characters. It kind of felt weird. You move on from the mountain, and then you're just kind of capturing all these mice that you've been finding all over Narnia already. So for sure, I think we needed some new lab mice. We have a good selection, though, of new characters that you come across when you first get to the Mausoleum, because they're not really found in Narnia very much. So we try, we do try to maybe minimize how many new mice we add. We know it's a mild annoyance anyway if you've sort of completed a collection to have new things added to that collection, especially if you've earned King's Crowns on some of the mice in that area. And you come back and now you have 500 of all these mice and 0 of this one, and you want to get that one up to 500, and then all the other ones are at 1,200 by the time you get there. But, something we keep in mind, but it isn't a hard and fast rule. The Mutated Mole, Jacob drew a while back. Is that a new lab boss? It will be tied into how you will unlock Digby now. So you'll no longer get the key to Digby. I believe a dwarf mouse drops it in the lab. You'll no longer get that in the lab. You'll have to find some living shards, which will be moved to the Mausoleum. The monster mouse is no longer going to drop living shards. But when you hunt the vampires, they'll drop a few living shards that'll allow somebody to craft limelight trees for the first time, at least, unless they use events or King's Credits or something like that to do it. And then using limelight at the lab will be how you discover the mutated mole mouse, who will reveal the path to Digby. Will the new area still be a Grand Duke area? I believe the only thing we sort of, and again, it's very early in the planning phase. Let me just double check here. We have a Duke area that's kind of being brainstormed to follow Queso Canyon, and then an Archduke area that is being brainstormed, which will follow Machu Picchu. But no new Grand Duke, at least nothing sort of in the tentative design plans at the moment. Couldn't you buy shards? Yes, you can buy shards in the town of Digby, but you're going to require some limelight to unlock Digby. So kind of the first time you hunt with limelight, it'll kind of feel a little bit special, and then you unlock Digby, and then that sort of comes with the ability to purchase the living shards. Have you considered adding new high-level library assignments? Yes, we have. We have a bit of an idea based on feedback to completely overhaul the Crystal Library. I don't know if it'll be something that we get to anytime soon, but it's something in the backlog. Certainly, as we've sort of started at the beginning of the game, we've been overhauling areas as we go, but it'd be quite some time before we made it all the way past the Tribal Isles, past Ugzoink's Tower, into the Crystal Library in that order, but we'll see. Will the Duke area be the source of bland queso? I think if any area that we tied in with Queso Canyon as well, especially if it was a slightly higher rank, there would be a way to obtain queso there as well. You can kind of let us know what you think about that. Any new story branching from the iceberg? Nothing planned, no. Any change for Sunken City? Nothing planned. Will we lower the 500 Queen Quesada for the theme scrap? You can certainly let us know what you think. If you think that's a little too high. Journal themes have always kind of been, or most of them anyway, a very above and beyond sort of accomplishment. But perhaps tying it to a gold crown is a little bit too big of an accomplishment, especially because you can already kind of have the bragging rights that you have a gold crown. So maybe the journal should lie somewhere in between that. You can let us know what you think. Whether it should instead be found in unstable gadgets, and it's kind of uncommon to find there. So you're going to need quite a few Queen Quesadas, but probably not 500. Way too high. Good to know. Any new law traps planned? For those who missed out on LE traps, the slack grind at Clawshot City is tough. It is tough, but I think the ball gets rolling once you obtain that. If you try not to move forward too fast, obviously you don't want to go get the slack one and then trying to move on to Fort Rocks with it or something. Use the Gang Boss for the Queso Canyon expansion. We were kind of brainstorming something that would have been a good thematic fit. It was inspired by a suggestion on the forum, but it didn't end up working out. So who knows if that mouse will ever see the light of day. Will ghost ships return for Halloween? I think so. We certainly had positive feedback, and kind of let us know what you think. Journal is cosmetic, no harm in it being way too hard. So that's Dennis there. And the theme scraps certainly are, the journal themes are often kind of really above and beyond things. The fungal cavern theme, for instance, like you need a lot of crucibles, you really need to commit to the fungal cavern. You're going to be hanging out there long after you've unlocked the lab. But yeah, it's finding the balance between it being a above and beyond accomplishment, but without being, like a whole other atmosphere, way too high of an accomplishment. I still haven't put together the Relic Hunter theme. That one's a tough one for sure. But then when it's on when somebody looks at your profile and that theme is on there, if they know kind of where it came from, it embodies this accomplishment. You can visually see like, whoa, that person's done a ton of maps. Like Ghost Ships. Ghost Ships good. We've had a lot of positive feedback, so I could see us repeating it. Add a new ship here and there. Some new rewards to earn, maybe a few new mice. I heard that rainbow maps will add a 6th slot. Will open maps be updated? They should, yes. We're still kind of playtesting that, but I think rainbow maps are going to get bumped up to 6 slots with the start of the new Relic Hunter season, which is coming in just over a week. Was it August 28th? So I guess 11 days. I'm over 100 catches of the Queen, still no theme scrap yet. You need 500. The 500th catch will currently drop the theme scrap. But we're open to adjusting that based on feedback. I like the 500 catches for the theme scrap, keeps me going. I'm almost ready, hunting with over 650 flaming queso to get enough resources for wildfire. It does seem to be a little polarizing. Like I said, I think I can understand, though, in that there's already an achievement for getting 500 catches, and that is the gold crown, so there's a way to show it off. Certainly, even on your profile, you could mark that as a favorite crown, and seeing that you've gold crowned Queen Quesada is still quite the above and beyond accomplishment. But even if we don't end up changing the Queso Canyon theme, it's good feedback for future themes, maybe making them take much longer than the Area's Adventure, much longer than any sort of the hidden mice that you can find there, but not too much past that sort of level of challenge. The Bland alone takes half a year hunting in one place. I don't think it would take that long. On that note, we'll switch over to a quick trivia question, and as always, Larry has a reward. It's slightly tied into or slightly themed with the Burroughs overhaul here. And this week's trivia question is, what is the most expensive trap currently sold in the town of Digby? 48 is incorrect. We've yet to add the 48 trap. 3 and 22 are also incorrect. Bottomless Grave. Brian is in with the correct answer first. KDM in a close second there with the Digby drill bot, but the Bottomless Grave is more than the drill bot. The Bottomless Grave costs 673,630 gold. That is a very precise number for some reason. Let me see if I can get the reward link up on the screen here. Oh, I didn't test this link. Let me make sure it works. Thrilling. Alright. Oh, where is text? There we go. How do computers work? There we go. Whoa, what is that? Some weird flexing going on. Alright. Now that said, and we're curious to see what hunters think about this as well. As I said, we're moving the Digby. So I'll put it in the chat as well. Bottomless. As I said, we're moving these shadow traps out of the town of Digby, and they'll be sold instead at the laboratory and the mausoleum. And sort of as we've gone through and play testing this a little bit, the cost of these traps seem a little bit too high. Basically, you get there, you're all set to move on to the mausoleum, but for all intents and purposes, most players right then, they're actually quite a ways off from being able to afford those traps. And I think this is a side effect of it being about 9.5-year-old content. The laboratory was once sort of the very end of the game. We weren't even sure how much longer people would stick around and keep playing the game for. So the Bottomless Grave was this really, above and beyond, like, okay, for the few people who actually stick around and play this long and get to the mausoleum, they have a extra above and beyond goal to strive for, to be able to afford the all-expensive Bottomless Grave trap. So with that in mind, we're thinking that we're going to reduce the costs of all 3 of those traps, making the Ambrosial Portal much more affordable, the Sinister Portal knocking it down a little bit, and the Bottomless Grave as well, reducing the cost. So it's a little bit more in line with, in 2018, a Master Hunter being there, kind of what amount of gold they're expected to have at that point. "10 Temporal Shadow Plates, not 10 Radioactive Sludge." Oh, did I get that wrong? Oh, maybe next week. I meant to do Temporal Shadow Plates, but I guess Larry made the link for Sludge. If we want to get the Ember Charm, we need to get over 100 Unstable Ember Gadgets. I believe the Ember Charm is inside of the gadgets, but there's a chance to find it with every poke. No Relic Hunter Season 6 news. I think we went over quite a bit last week. I think we covered a lot of bases, got a lot of great feedback that sort of helped us mold some of the final decisions for Relic Hunter Season 6. A lot of quality of life improvements coming, a lot of interface improvements to make maps easier to do, easier to organize. Probably the biggest, or the only really new kind of big feature is a new scavenger hunt type map where you're going to be able to look for items. So if you prefer that rather than doing the mouse maps. An Ember Charm with my first 5 gadgets, it's just random, yes. I don't know what the chances are. I'd assume it's relatively low. And you can sell them on the marketplace. Items, gadget. You put your gadget in, you put your gadget out. It's loading slowly. Yeah, it's about a 1 in 50, I'd say. Looks to be a 1 in 50 chance to get an Ember gadget, so you don't need 100. After you've poked 50, if you don't have one, then you're on the poor side of luck. If you poke 5 and you get one, you're on the amazing side of luck. That little standard deviation set. Have you decided whether scavenger maps will get a bonus item in addition to the chest? Right now, we're leaning toward no. We've been playtesting it, being able to try to get a feel for it now that we actually have it up and running and we can play through them. That said, I think too what we're going to do is start the season off, get feedback from everybody on scavenger hunt maps once everybody can kind of play through them, feel how, or get a sense for it in the live game as well. As best we try testing it, everything always feels just slightly different once it's live, and I think it's the 15-minute wait. It's also you have a lot of good context of sort of the equipment and all the resources that are currently in your inventory to know where you are at in the game. Just that level of difficulty is hard to get up things. Big question that was left off. Will elite scavenger hunts be a thing or not? Asks Stejan. Let me double check here. Oh, I don't even have code open right now, though. Alright, where is this? This is in this branch? Yes. And it's in a file. It's always awkward. I mean, we kind of joke about this a little bit here at the office as well, but the whole map system is probably one of the more oddly put together systems in the game. I mean, with any sort of large project, there's always parts of the code that are like, that one's a little weird, and for us it's maps. Maps and auras. Unfortunately, they're a little hard to access in the code and really know what's going on here sometimes. So yeah, there's a big old switch statement somewhere, hiding somewhere. CPU fans turning on now that I have yet another piece of software open while streaming. That's a good detail. I mean, we'll have to figure that out. Right now, actually, the elites are active, but I fear that there's not quite enough items in them for it to be interesting. That said, it does require a very high hunter's title. You'd have to be a sage currently to be able to obtain an elite map. Guess what? I'm going to open up another piece of software. Let's open up spreadsheet software. What do I got? I got streaming, a browser, chat program, coding ID, and a spreadsheet open. Oh yeah, computer loves it. Fan is just running. Scavenger maps. Let me close something. Yeah, I'm going to close that ID. There we go. Also doing a file search didn't help. I don't think that helped at all. Hard, elaborate, arduous, elite. Let me see here. So right now we have the elite would be 50 items, and it would include 15 pretty tough items, whereas the arduous is 40 items, and it includes 10 pretty tough items. So you can kind of let us know what you think, if you'd like to see that extra level of difficulty right off the bat. Even if there aren't, I guess it won't feel that different. The difference between arduous and elite, they're going to be using pretty well all the same items. It's just the elite's going to pick a few tougher items. Dan says, the laptop is a big fan of you. I like that. I'll take puns anywhere I can get them. Are regular elite Relic Hunter maps a thing for sages too? No, they're not. We're kind of waiting for there to be at least an Archduke level area in the game, and I think the requirement for elite regular maps is Archduke. So we're close. I think it's kind of disabled right now. We're waiting for there to be a larger pool of mice. I'd lean towards following suit with scavenger hunts. That said, I think there's Toxic Spill has an elite level difficulty, and that's the one that includes an Archduke mouse. Isn't Sage a bit too much? Could be. The scavenger maps, they all start at a much higher tier than the regular maps, and a lot of that has to do with just the fact that there aren't enough interesting loot drops at lower levels to really design scavenger hunts for like masters. So I think the minimum title requirement to start a scavenger hunt is hero, whereas a regular Relic Hunter map you can start at novice. So that kind of curve shifted everything up a little bit. Is the laptop a big fan of coffee? No. This one has yet to taste any coffee. My last laptop got to taste quite a bit of coffee, but then its final coffee was its demise. Overdid it. What's the deal with plank run journal pages? They're impossible to find. They're a little bit tricky. That's something else that's sort of in the idea bank to overhaul one day, but we've been prioritizing events, content, bug fixes, and infrastructure updates. I believe there's only 15 sages in the game right now, says Beth. There aren't very many, no. Again, I think that they're not going to be included with Relic Hunter Season 6, just because there just aren't enough high-level areas to really kind of make the map stand out and be different, other than them having 5 more items on them. I don't know if that'll be that much more difficult to sort of justify the jump up in reward of the elite chests having more ancient charms. Elder is the requirement right now for Arduous. Right now the requirements are, so a novice, well actually be hero I guess, but technically if somehow a novice got their hands on a scroll case they would be able to open it up, but they'd have to wait quite a long time before they finish it. Hero is for easy. Count is the minimum for medium. Archduke is the minimum for hard. Viceroy is the minimum for elaborate, and Elder is the minimum for arduous, which is why Sage is the minimum for elite. Now again, a lot of that is born out of the quantity of drops to make them feel different. Unlike mice, there's lots and lots of mice, but loot drops themselves are a little more few and far between, a little bit more unique. So it was difficult to put together lists that feel unique and different from one another. So then as time goes on and we add more areas, they'll kind of get a little bit more unique from each other as time goes on. Whereas if they're bunched up a little bit too much, then I think they're going to feel a little bit more static. They won't really feel like that level of difficulty takes you to different spots, but then again, we could always adjust it in the future, right? I mean, there's not that many areas, so we could kind of keep everything at a similar sort of theme or similar types of items, and then as we have those higher level areas, maybe that's when we could overhaul it. Relic Hunter Season 12 or something like that. 12, that would be a long time from now. Yeah, that is the problem, right? You can access all the same areas, which makes some of the difficulty, making them the difficulty tiers unique. Maybe we just start with fewer difficulty tiers until we have higher level areas. Those will be the ranks to open the maps, not join. Yes, that is correct. Where is the requirements to join? Somewhere. Novice can be invited to an easy map. A recruit can be invited to a medium and a hard. Master can be invited to elaborate, legendary to an arduous, and knight to an elite. So if you're a knight, you will be able to do every single scavenger hunt that we have planned right now. But to find the scrolls, you need to be much higher level. But that said, the elaborate, the arduous, and the elite would feel very similar to one another. They're all using basically the same items, but in different quantities. Now that said, an elaborate map is going to take you from areas from Master all the way, when we get there it would take you to Viceroy, but it's going to take you to Grand Duke right now. The arduous will take you from Legendary up to eventually Elder, but Archduke levels, or Grand Duke levels right now, and the elite would take you from Knight. So for example, runes, you'll never be asked to go and find runes on one of the elite maps, but on an arduous map you may be asked to go find runes because legendary is sort of the lowest tier of item that is on there. And we can play around a little bit, see if we can make the item count still fit within those titles. Or maybe we just start with fewer, and as we add more content, more loot drops, it'll be easier to add higher difficulty scavenger hunts. There are runes in Sunken City. That is true. Yeah, there's a little bit of not an Easter egg drop, but it's a little bit of a trickle of them you get there. But for all intents and purposes, kind of group the items by their primary area, like the resource where they're most abundant and where most players actually put them to use. And runes, that would certainly be the Acolyte realm, which is legendary. So I'm going to see what players think. I don't know if there's much difference when you're Viceroy. Obviously, you have access to the same number of areas, but do you have any less desire to want to go back to, say, the Acolyte realm than, say, somebody who is a Count? Someone who's a Count, are they going to be a little more willing to go back to the Acolyte realm than somebody who is a Viceroy or something? Can we use Rare Map Dust to upgrade a common chest even after completed? That's interesting. I mean, for all intents and purposes, it's the same thing. Now then, only you get the rare chest rather than everybody, but I could see if you wanted to if you forgot to dust it or something, but it's going to kind of, the dust could have been 5 chests and then it's only 1, so that's an interesting observation. Keep the scroll value equal, be in need of Relic Hunter opening difficulty being similar to Scavenger Hunt. Now again, the Scavenger Hunts, they're all a little, they're targeted toward higher level players because there just aren't enough loot drops at lower levels to really put together an interesting map. For instance, putting together a map for an Apprentice Hunter, the Scavenger Hunt's probably going to be identical every single time. There weren't too many meaningful loot drops at that level. This spreadsheet here. In fact, unless this is sorted wrong, no, there's only one apprentice item, a packet of flour. I feel like higher levels are more willing to go back to lower levels only because they've probably finished most of the content in the game. It's interesting. Might be a kind of a bit of a polarizing thing. I've kind of seen feedback both ways then. Counts concerned with doing the content that is new to them. Okay, I can kind of see that point of view. You know, you have a lot of important goals ahead of you. We have a base with the Denter base is mechanic, but with shiny precious gold instead. That did cross our minds. It didn't quite feel Ronza appropriate. But we would like to maybe do something similar with shiny precious gold, but maybe something that has a little bit more of a labyrinth use to it. The scavengers are supposed to be harder than Relic Hunter, aimed at higher level players, so the reward be higher as well. That's kind of something we've been playing around with. That's why we were talking about maybe adding bonus items as a reward from doing them. Now, after we've play tested them, they don't feel too much more challenging. You have to kind of think a little bit more. But at the end of the day, you can still go through them pretty quick. So we're going to kind of maybe see, once things are out, what the final feedback is to come to a final decision. They'll have strong temptation to sell slots. That's an interesting point. That will be kind of, if you want to think of it in that way, it's almost like a resource that you don't have access to until you get that to be that title. That's interesting. That said, right now there's really nothing special about those titles. There's no really unique abilities or access to things that you unlock for being that high level. Bonus King's credits would be fine by me. No need to do anything too fancy. That did cross our minds as well, whether it would be King's credits or a little bit of Super Brie. I think we'll kind of wait and see, though. Once things are live, get feedback from everybody and do a tweak or two if need be. Will the scavenger maps have a chance of Slayer scroll drop then? Yes, they reward the exact same chests, so you can decide whether you prefer doing scavenger hunts or whether you prefer doing Relic Hunter maps. So that actually might speak to as well, depending on what the final rewards. If we do add a bonus reward, that would affect it. But selling a slot on a higher tier scavenger hunt map, it's not really a unique reward you get for completing it. So I don't know if it'd be all that tempting of an option. Is it possible to get both bases from one chest? No, it's or is it? I'd have to double check. I don't think it is though. I think they both get put into like the same slot in the chest, and then you get one or the other. So somebody who is incredibly unlucky, they might get the first deadly item on their 30th chest, and the second one will be on their 31st because it'll be 100% again. But that would be statistically improbable. But there's probably given enough people, one person will be that unlucky, I suppose. All right. On that note, we should wrap things up here as we approach the 50-minute mark. We're getting into the epically long Feedback Friday territory. So thanks for joining me this week, Hunters. Thanks for the feedback, giving your impressions on the Burroughs overhaul, the Burroughs updates that are coming along. Like I said, it's going to be quite some time before the Burroughs updates make it into the game. We'll probably go over it again on a Feedback Friday once we have a little bit more to share, been able to incorporate more feedback, do some play testing. Other than that, I think now it will probably be Jacob next week, unless a similar occurrence happens where he needs to be in the office here to collaborate on something. So thanks for joining me, thanks for the feedback, and I'll see you, I guess, in 2 weeks. Actually, let me double check here. I might be away on that Friday. I sure am, so we'll see. I'm going to say 50-50 whether it's me or Jacob next week. And then for sure it'll be Jacob on the 31st. Want to come say bye? Oh, what is this? What is going on here? Oh, there we go.
Hello, everybody. How are you? Yeah, so it'll be Jacob next week, and then every day in September, every single day will be Franco for 3 hours straight.